All right, so your paper on directors is due today. Again, I may talk about the person that I assigned to you today, but don't feel upset if I don't talk about your particular person. It just means you're going to know somebody that we might not know. For the top 10 directors is what I'm going to call them. This is my personal list. There's no other way to look at it. Any kind of list has to be subjective. What I've used as my guideline are the Tony Awards, which by definition are Broadway, which by definition typically are musicals. So you're going to see there's a heavy slant towards musicals in these directors, although there's some that certainly haven't done a lot of work in musicals. But again, these people have all been awarded at least a Tony Award. Again, Hal Prince has got 21 of them, so that's the most of all time for any particular person. Only 8 of them are for directing, though. But again, the role of the director was, and even though people are going to tell you the Duke of Saxe-Meiningen in Luxembourg in the latter half of the 19th century is considered by most people to be the world's first director. What that means is that he had no other position in the company. He wasn't the playwright, he wasn't an actor, he wasn't the set designer, he wasn't the lighting designer. He has a particular role that became known as the role of the director. But shows before that, I mean, when Shakespeare was around, there was somebody that told people where to stand. There was somebody who told people where to speak and how to do it. Generally it was the playwright, sometimes the leading actor in the play. But the Duke of Saxe-Meiningen sort of originated this separate and equal and maybe superior role of the director. And it was up to people like Wagner, Richard Wagner, who wrote all these operas in the 19th century, who said, you know what, that's a great idea. There needs to be somebody who guides the production, and they called him the director. Like Gordon Craig, who said that there should be a person who is responsible, and called them a director. And so, again, the history of direction only goes back 150, 200 years at most. And so one of the things is it makes all these people very modern looking. Again, I'm gonna just give you a quick introduction, and some of these videos we're gonna watch will give you a very detailed history of the person, especially if they passed along. Some of them will show you ways that they work, and that sort of thing. So, but each of them will have a little video that tells you a little bit about each of these 10 directors. Again, I'm going to start off with Hal Prince. Hal Prince started as a producer or assistant producer to George Abbott, who we will discuss in a little bit. But Hal Prince recently died. He died in 2019, born in 1928. He produced some of Broadway's greatest productions, or co-produced with George Abbott, some of them, Fiddler on the Roof being among them. In the latter half, he joined up with a man named Stephen Sondheim, and they produced and directed 6 musicals, including Follies, including Company, including Sweeney Todd. Of his 8 Tony Awards for Best Direction, 4 of them are for directing a play or a musical by Stephen Sondheim. A Little Night Music was the other one. They had a couple of not so big hits. Pacific Overtures is one of them. They're Playing Our Song is the other, I guess. No, not They're Playing Our Song. What is it? The other one. I can't think of it at the moment, but it's one of Val's favorites. Hey, Old Friends. What do they say, Old Friends? What's that from? I don't know. You don't know either. Okay, well, I'll get in trouble for that, but that's okay.
Most friends fade or they don't make the grade. New ones are quickly made, perfect as long as they're new. But us old friends, what's to discuss, old friends?
Anyway, he also is noted for working with Andrew Lloyd Webber. He directed Evita. He directed, of course, the longest running play in Broadway history, Phantom of the Opera. So here's a little video about our good friend Hal Prince.
Finally tonight, a Broadway great has died. Director and producer Harold Prince won an astonishing 21 Tony Awards with shows that became household names and whose popularity endures even now. This is part of our ongoing arts and culture series, Canvas. Harold Hal Prince was full of surprises and created memorable works still being performed many years after their debuts. He started first as a producer of shows such as The Pajama Game, Damn Yankees, West Side Story, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, and Fiddler on the Roof. Talking to the NewsHour in 1986, he had this to say about his career.
When I went into the theater, it cost $250,000 to do a musical. Most of us were neophytes. We got our experience right on the spot. It is overwhelming, the experience of having a $4 million investment on your shoulders.
Eric Schaefer is the longtime artistic director of Signature Theater in Arlington, Virginia, and staged many of Prince's plays over the years. In fact, Signature, which won a Tony Award for Best Regional Theater in the country, honored Prince for his work in 2013.
He was an icon, and you know, when you were growing up, you were like, if I can live up to be like Hal Prince, that would be amazing. He was a captain of the ship, and you know, whenever there was problems, he always made it look like there were none, and made it easy, smooth sailing.
Prince went on to direct landmark musicals such as Cabaret, Company, Follies, Sweeney Todd, Evita, and Phantom of the Opera. During his over 50-year career, Prince received 2 special Tonys, in addition to the 21 statues, when in 1972, Fiddler became Broadway's longest-running musical, and then again 2 years later for a revival of Candide. He also received a Kennedy Center honor and was known as a master collaborator, the Prince of Broadway. In a feature for PBS's Great Performances, Prince discussed the change he's seen in Broadway since he started his career as a director.
I wanted to provoke conversation. I wanted issues on the stage, as they had been in my youth.
It was with the legendary Stephen Sondheim, who was the lyricist for West Side Story, that Prince developed a long-lasting friendship and professional partnership. They went on to work on A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum and many more.
Their relationship really changed the American musical theater. All of their work was groundbreaking in the sense that it was either pushing the style or the form of the musical theater, but also the stories that they were telling. They were telling stories that no one else would tell. And that's kind of amazing.
Prince's publicist said he died in Iceland after a brief illness. Harold Prince was 91.
Think of me fondly when we've said goodbye.
Wonderful to remember him and his amazing career.
All right, so probably one of the best directors who didn't really do any musicals is a man named Mike Nichols. Mike Nichols has won 6 Tony Awards for Best Direction, and he's been nominated for 10 of his plays. He has also won a Tony Award for one musical, but that's, again, not his bailiwick. He has also crossed over into films. He directed The Graduate, among others. Here's a little video about our good friend Mike Nichols.
We celebrate a legend, director Mike Nichols, who has died at the age of 83, a singular talent, a singular human being, beloved by Hollywood's brightest stars and beloved by his family here at ABC. You will remember his movies. They made us laugh, they made us cry, they made us think.
Mike Nichols had a mind that never stopped, always a thirst for what was next. Just recently taking on a new project with Meryl Streep, just one of the many actors who always came back to work with Mike.
You have shown us how a person can become essential. You're one of our era's essential artists, Mike. You're one of our essential people.
Mike was known in Hollywood and on Broadway for his many gifts, among them getting actors to break through their own boundaries, perhaps because he was a performer himself. In his college years, teaming up with Elaine May, Nichols and May, as they were called.
I feel awful. Oh, honey, if I could believe that, I'd be the happiest mother.
His first movie, Behind the Lens, as director, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, starring Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor.
Oh, baby, aren't you something? Well, I've got to find some way to get at you.
Richard Burton once sang of Nichols, "I didn't think I could learn anything about comedy, but from him I learned."
Hello, darkness.
Mike Nichols' next movie, The Graduate, and it was Mike who chose an unknown Dustin Hoffman to play an all-American boy coming of age.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me.
The winner is Mike Nichols.
Nichols would win the Oscar.
It's a picture made by a group, and we cared for what we were doing, so this award quite literally belongs to them, at least as much as it does to me. I'm grateful to them, and I'd also like to wish my mother a happy birthday.
He came to America at 7 years old, his family escaping Nazi Germany. And it would be here he would explore so much of our American lives, championing the working class and working girl.
I have a head for business and a bod for sin. Is there anything wrong with that?
And there was the birdcage.
You do Fosse, Fosse, Fosse. You do Martha Graham, Martha Graham, Martha Graham.
Hi, Mama.
Postcards from the edge.
You're beautiful.
And closer.
My favorite thing about Mike is that he is the most encouraging person that I have ever met. Everything about Mike makes everything about everything just better.
Nichols was part of a rare group, able to say they'd won the Oscar, a Tony, an Emmy, and a Grammy. On Broadway, so many of his productions, Spam-A-Lot, and just 2 years ago, a Tony for the revival of Death of a Salesman.
And the Tony Award goes to Mike Nichols for Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman.
Sharing that moment with Diane before telling millions watching.
You see before you a happy man.
Happiest, Mike often said, when surrounded by his family. His children, Daisy, Max, and Jenny, his grandchildren, and the woman he married in 1988. He said, over and over, I was luckier than I had any right to be. I found the love of my life. And we all knew here that he and Diane reveled in the joy of being grandparents.
Love, family, food, movies. Good night, moon. Good night, stars. I'll see you on the set, in the beach, and in the kitchen, and at the movies.
And tomorrow night, the lights on Broadway will go dark to honor the legendary director, and later hear what Diane once said about meeting the man who would become her best friend. And I should let you all know that she spent this day surrounded by family.
Again, probably one of the great things about Bob Fosse is that, as opposed to Hal Prince or Mike Nichols, Mike Nichols, I would say, had a style, but it wasn't a dominant style. Bob Fosse's style was dominant. When you're looking at Bob Fosse's show, you know you're looking at Bob Fosse's show. Bob Fosse grew up as a dancer. He was balding. He had a bad back, and so he created these moves and these dance moves that usually involve some sort of use of a hat, that usually involve some sort of angular use of the body that wasn't necessarily in the fluid type of choreography that had come before it. There are a couple of unique things about him. First of all, he won an Oscar, a Tony, and an Emmy for directing, Best Direction, all in the same year. He won the Tony Award for Chicago, the Oscar for Cabaret, and the Emmy for Liza with a Z in 1972. He also was nominated for both choreographer and director and playwright for Pippin in 1976. So he worked a lot. The only person to pull that off was Lin-Manuel Miranda. So he was triple nominated as well. So here's a little information about our good friend Bob Fosse.
As the opening credits make clear, the magic of Pippin wouldn't exist if it weren't for the contributions of many different people. But the late legendary director and choreographer Bob Fosse is the man who brought Pippin to life on stage and on video. Bob Fosse is the creative genius behind many major musical hits like Chicago and Sweet Charity and Cabaret. And he is the man who choreographed his own sense of what dying would be like in the award-winning movie All That Jazz in 1980, 6 years before his own death from a heart attack in 1986. Fosse was a complex man of the theater who didn't give many interviews. Back in the 80s, though, Fosse did consent to talk with me about the nature of his genius and his chain-smoking workaholic lifestyle.
Has it been worth it for you? In your own...
Wow. That's a tough question. I certainly have received a lot of benefit from it. I like my life. I think that I would be better off if I could get away from work sometimes and not let it eat at me and not be so obsessed with it. But it doesn't happen. I'm sorry, I need it one more time, please. Same thing. I'm happiest when I'm rehearsing. I'm happiest in places like this.
When you saw that this driven kind of life was driving you almost to the point of physical extinction, though, did that freak you out at all and make you kind of reevaluate?
I don't know. I think a lot of us have this sense of immortality. It's not going to happen to us, you know. It's going to happen to the guy in the next bed or the guy on the other side, but it's not going to happen to you. Is it any good when they start the second part?
Parts of it.
Yeah. Like anyone else, I'm afraid of failure, although I don't think that's the major thing. And afraid that the ideas that I have, I don't have the talent to execute. Can we try the whole shot once? I think I would like to do better things, better quality things, more important things, and at the same time there's a fear that I don't have the equipment, the talent, the intelligence to bring them off.
You still have that fear, having proven and overcome that question so many times? Cabaret, Lenny, all that jazz, and Sweet Charity.
I don't know how it works on other people, but it's just, yes, I do. You know, like Chaplin said, all of us are amateurs. None of us live long enough to be anything else but. Every time I start on something new, it's like day one. How do we do this? I mean, and in dancing, it should be easy. You got a left foot and a right foot. You say, well, you got to step off on one of those. The decision shouldn't be that hard to make.
Yeah, it's one or the other. Right?
Yeah. So I roll the dice and I say, right foot, here we go.
But you've proven so many times already. I mean, it's up there, it's on film, it's been on stage. The proof of your talent and expertise and overwhelming skill it seems manifest. Huh?
Let me ask you, how many directors, choreographers you've seen have brilliant shows or movies, and then the next 8 things they do are right down the drain? I mean, this business is loaded with such stories. It could happen. It could happen to me easily.
Do you have any real regrets about any of it? The life of obsession and compulsion?
I've learned to live with it. You know, at my age, you can't alter your behavior that much. I don't think. I mean, I try, but I don't think I can. So the best thing is to say, well, this is what I have, and this is the kind of person I am. So I guess I'll live the rest of my life that way.
And he did continue living that way. Even heart attacks, hospitals, and doctors' warnings couldn't stop Bob Fosse from pursuing the perfection of whatever creative vision he was possessed by.
I'm sorry, I need it one more time, please. Same thing.
That pursuit of perfection brought Bob Fosse many awards over the years, but he was most touched when All That Jazz won the Cannes Film Festival Grand Prize, as presented by Dirk Bogarde and Kirk Douglas.
The Palme d'Or executor, Bob Fosse's All That Jazz.
It was Fosse's self-examination in All That Jazz through the obsessed choreographer character Joe Gideon, played by Roy Scheider, that also brought repeated questions at the Cannes press conference about the movie being self-indulgent.
20 minutes of dance dedicated to Joe Gideon's death. If I were to choreograph my own, I think it would be longer.
It's showtime, folks.
The identification with Joe Gideon is certainly true, but I think any director identifies with all the characters in every theatrical venture he does.
So All That Jazz has made it to the French Riviera, and it really is surprising for me to learn that this is actually your first trip to the Cannes Film Festival, a man of your esteemed background in the world of cinema, with films like Cabaret, and Lenny was even a big contender in the festival one year. I would have thought that you might have been here before, but you haven't.
I wanted to come in '75 when Lenny was here. And as I don't know if you remember, but Valerie Perrine won a prize that year. But that was the year I was sick and I was in the hospital when it happened. So I would get daily reports from here, but this is my first visit.
That's right. That was the year you were actually living the story that became the story for All That Jazz, right?
Well, part of it anyway.
Yeah.
Fosse was glad he made it to Cannes because the festival audience gave All That Jazz a very unusual standing ovation.
My entire life, I don't think I've ever been around a response like that at the end of the film. It was, it makes all this stuff that you go through in show business and trying so desperately to get something on and you believe in it. It makes it all worthwhile suddenly. In 2 minutes, it's something, well, I'm glad I did it.
Great. Probably the dean of theater is a man named George Abbott. He started off mostly as a producer, but then began directing. He was known as a show doctor. He was noted for being able to come in, for instance, with Fiddler on the Roof. They brought him in and said something's just not working. And he's the one who said, well, you have to sit it down and tell me what it's about. And if it's about traditions and people breaking traditions, you have to have a song about traditions to tell me what the traditions are, which of course is the first song in Cabaret. Fiddler on the Roof. But he didn't direct that. He came in and gave advice to that. He worked for 9 decades in theater. He gave Hal Prince his start. He also gave Bob Fosse his start. Again, I would say the biggest shows are Pal Joey, On the Town, maybe a funny thing happened with the Forum. He was the first person to integrate ballet to help tell the story. Other people had used songs to tell the story, but he is when he directed On Your Toes. It became there's a ballet that helps tell the story. He also was the first one to musicalize Shakespeare, was Boys from Syracuse. But he's a great innovator. Damn Yankees, Pajama Game, among them. So here's a little bit about our good friend, Mr. Abbott.
Sing me a happy song about robins in spring.
Sing me a happy song with a happy ending.
Some cheerful rondelay about hatching the ring. Sing happy.
From the two of us, and from every other kid who started in the chorus of a George Abbott show.
From everyone working in the musical theater today, we would like to say, thank you, Mr. Abbott.
Something familiar, something peculiar, something for everyone, a comedy tonight. Old situations, new complications, nothing portentous or polite. Tragedy tomorrow, comedy tonight.
Falling in love, love is falling for make-believe. Falling in love with love is playing the fool. I fell in love with love everlasting. But love fell out with me.
Two lost souls on the highway of life. We ain't even got a sister or brother. But ain't it just great? Ain't it just grand? We've got each other. Two lost sheep from the wilds of the hills, far from the others, Jacks and Jills. We wandered away and went astray, but we ain't fussing, 'cause we got us in.
Once in love with Amy, always in love with Amy, ever and ever fascinated by her, set your heart afire to stay. Once in love with Amy, always in love with Amy, ever and ever sweetly you'll romance her. Trouble is the answer, will be that Amy'd rather stay in love with me.
I got Steve Need, I got Steve Need, I got Steve Need, but I need your love to keep away the cold. Trouble more coal in the boiler. There's only trouble more coal in the boiler.
I'm really ashamed at all the fuss that's being made over my birthday. I didn't plan it, but I'm glad I lasted so long. I tell people that it's because I love the theater so much that I thought I'd stick around. Most of you know that it is very exciting. It makes life worthwhile. I have to confess, I'm just in love with showbiz. And so, tonight, when you tell me that you think what I did was good, it makes me happy. Good night. Thank you.
Mr. Abbott was beloved by almost everyone. The next guy we're going to talk about certainly has his people who are fans of his, but because he testified before the House on Un-American Activities Committee and named names, there's a large section of society, especially in the theater world, that has turned their back on him. His name is Elia Kazan. He lived from 1909 to 2003. And he worked with the group theater to help develop what is today known as method acting. Method acting comes from Konstantin Stanislavski's theories about using psychological motivation for character advancement. But there were several people in America who helped to develop a more method approach to the questions to ask and the way to approach character development. Among them was Elia Kazan. Again, he worked on Broadway. His two biggest claims to fame, I want to say, were Tennessee Williams plays, Count on Hot Tin Roof, and Streetcar Named Desire. He also directed the movie versions of those. So he, like Mike Nichols, were both people who crossed over into film. I hesitate to mention this, but he also had a little fling with our good friend Marilyn Monroe. But here's a little bit about our good friend Elia Kazan.
Elia Kazan, born Elias Kazansoglou, September 7, 1909, September 28, 2003, was a Greek-American director, producer, writer and actor, described by the New York Times as one of the most honored and influential directors in Broadway and Hollywood history. He was born in what was then Constantinople, Istanbul after 1923, to Cappadocian Greek parents. After attending Williams College and then the Yale School of Drama, he acted professionally for 8 years, later joining the group theater in 1932, and co-founded the Actors Studio in 1947. With Robert Lewis and Cheryl Crawford, his Actors Studio introduced method acting under the direction of Lee Strasberg. Kazan acted in a few films, including City for Conquest, 1940, noted for drawing out the best dramatic performances from his actors. He directed 21 actors to Oscar nominations, resulting in 9 wins. He directed a string of successful films, including A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951, On the Waterfront, 1954, and East of Eden, 1955. During his career, he won 2 Oscars as Best Director, 3 Tony Awards, and 4 Golden Globes. He also received an honorary Oscar. His films were concerned with personal or social issues of special concern to him. Kazan writes, "I don't move unless I have some empathy with the basic theme." His first such issue film was Gentleman's Agreement, 1947, with Gregory Peck, which dealt with anti-Semitism in America. It received 8 Oscar nominations and 3 wins, including Kazan's first for Best Director. It was followed by Pinky, one of the first films in mainstream Hollywood to address racial prejudice against African Americans. In 1954, he directed On the Waterfront, a film about union corruption on the New York Harbor waterfront. A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951, an adaptation of the stage play which he had also directed, received 12 Oscar nominations, winning 4, and was Marlon Brando's breakthrough role. In 1955, he directed John Steinbeck's East of Eden, which introduced James Dean to movie audiences. A turning point in Kazan's career came with his testimony as a witness before the House Committee on Un-American Activities in 1952 at the time of the Hollywood blacklist, which brought him strong negative reactions from many liberal friends and colleagues. His testimony helped end the careers of former acting colleagues Morris Karnofsky and Art Smith, along with the work of playwright Clifford Odets. The two men had made a pact to name each other in front of the committee. Kazan later justified his act by saying he took only the more tolerable of two alternatives that were either way painful and wrong. Nearly a half-century later, his anti-communist testimony continued to cause controversy. When Kazan was awarded an honorary Oscar in 1999, dozens of actors chose not to applaud as 250 demonstrators picketed the event. Kazan influenced the films of the 1950s and 1960s with his provocative, issue-driven subjects. Director Stanley Kubrick called him, without question, the best director we have in America, and capable of performing miracles with the actors he uses. Film author Ian Freer concludes that even if his achievements are tainted by political controversy, the debt Hollywood and actors everywhere owes him is enormous. In 2010, Martin Scorsese co-directed the documentary film A Letter to Elia as a personal tribute to Kazan.
All right, one of my favorite directors, which may be the reason he's on this list, is a man named Trevor Nunn. Trevor Nunn is a British director. He was the head of the Royal Shakespeare Company for several years, for 12 years. He was also the head of the Royal National Theatre in London. He's currently working at the Haymarket Theatre in London. But I would say his first venture into American theatre was with The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby, which was an 8-hour play that you saw usually over 2 days. You could on Saturday and Sunday see a matinee and an evening, and that's what I did. It was the first Broadway ticket that cost $100 a ticket, and you got to sit there for 8 solid hours. Now, that sounds like a long time, but trust me, having experienced it, it went by like that. It was an amazing piece of theater, and his next play to follow that was a little play called Cats, which again, a lot of people, including Hal Prince, sort of turned down because they didn't sort of get it. One of the things that Trevor Nunn said when he was talking about the play was that it spanned generations. A 9-year-old could see it and get something out of it, and a 99-year-old could see it and get something out of it. It was a visual spectacle. A lot of people criticized it for not really having a detailed plot, but that's just the point. It was episodic. It was about cats. So he also directed one of my favorite shows, Les Miserables. So here's a little bit about our good friend Trevor Nunn.
There is one aspect of directing is teaching. And so he's come here to very informally teach and to respond to your questions. And on behalf of the college, I'm very grateful he has. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I've been talking to a very bright and sparky group of students from the point of view of being a theatre practitioner rather than an academic. And so, of course, most of the talk centred on Shakespeare because during my career I happen to have done 30 of the 37 plays. And so we talked a good deal about Hamlet and the astonishing amount of theatre reference that there is in that play. But to some extent about Twelfth Night and the circumstances of Shakespeare's working lifetime, and even the possibility that Shakespeare was his own director, which of course is a notion I find extremely flattering, but I should be doing the same job as the greatest writer who's ever lived.
So I've just been to a talk by Trevor Nunn on staging Shakespeare. It was a talk that he gave to the English BA students, but students from other subjects came along. It was just such a fascinating talk, and at NCH we have the opportunity to go and see talks from other disciplines. And he spoke generally about putting Shakespeare on the stage, but also specifically about 2 texts that we're studying for 2 of our courses, one which is Twelfth Night and one which is Hamlet. And he really brought his practitioner's expertise to talking about text that we're studying academically, which I think is a really important way of looking at it, because we're obviously academic students studying theatrical texts, and he was talking about how at the RSC they have a grounding in scholarly articles and books about Shakespeare, and that informs their work on a creative level. And I think it's important for us, something that I got from the talk, to be going to see theatre and to be engaged in a practitioner side as well as the academic side.
All right, one of the best directors working today, I would say, is a man named George C. Wolfe. George started out as a playwright and then worked with the Public Theater and became the head of the Public Theater for 12 years in the mid-90s. His first Tony Award was for a musical called Jelly's Last Jam, and he also won a Tony Award for directing Angels in America, the Pulitzer Prize winning play. But he is visionary and has a very strong sense of style as well. So here's a little bit about George C. Wolfe.
Theater is, to me, theater is a place for ideas, and characters and plot and story are used to lure you in, but what you end up taking home are ideas. And I think that film, because of the exacting nature of a camera, lends itself to realism, but can also, subvert the realism because of the technology, because of close-ups, because of any number of things. So it can be realistic, but also with a heightened sense of something or other. And so anytime I do plays, especially musicals, I try to create a visual sense of film. And anytime I have worked on film projects, I try to create this sense of theatricality that is pushing against the realism of the form.
Again, I think the next person we're going to talk about is Jerome Robbins. Jerome Robbins was mostly a choreographer. And if we were talking about choreographers, and I know a couple of these people have been choreographers, Jerome Robbins would have been probably higher on the list. The reason he's sort of here on the list is because really he had two great shows, two iconic shows, West Side Story, sort of integrated modern dance into the Romeo and Juliet story, and Fiddler on the Roof. Fiddler on the Roof, again, one of the great things about Jerome Robbins was he was able to take not just dance moves like Fosse and like others and put them into the play, but he was able to find the source material, the moves from the source material, the way that gang members moved, or the way that Hasidic Jews moved, that he would then incorporate into the motion of the characters in the play. And in both of those instances, they have become the iconic dance sequences. The bottle dance in Fiddler on the Roof, you just sort of have to do it that way. Nobody's going to do it any other way. And so they have both been copyrighted, the choreography for both those shows. Again, I think he probably would have been higher on my list had he directed a few more great hit musicals. That's all you got to do, Jerome. Direct a couple more musicals. Anyway, here's a little background story, and this one more is about how he worked as a choreographer.
5, 6, 1, 2, 3, yes, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, yes, 4.
To a choreographer, an empty stage or an empty rehearsal floor where you begin is a rather awesome place, because it's where you begin, where you put your first mark down, where you take your first step. And it's sort of like a painter deciding where to put the first line down on a canvas. It's thrilling. If I know the music, if I have some sense of the sound of the music, I know what's going on. When I'm doing a work that's already written, I study the score, and for months and months prior to the time of actually working on the piece, I play the music constantly, from the moment I get up to the moment I go to sleep. I'll play it while I'm shaving, I'll play it while I'm working around the house. I try to saturate myself with it so there isn't any note or nuance that I miss. That any work that I choreograph has to come out of a collaboration between the dancer and myself. I depend upon them for a certain amount of inspiration. What I try to feed them essentially is, let's say, the key to the work I'm doing. This isn't a question of having them improvise at all. What my instinct as a choreographer is, I will try some steps on them, see how their bodies go, see how their movements go. I don't like to give anything which is awkward or uncomfortable to the dancer. I will give things which is technically demanding. I think when people say, boy, you're a slave driver, my drive is to get the truth out of any situation.
I don't think you can put something muddled on the stage. And I think that if I am clear with the material, then it will be clear to the audience. It's that, in a way, almost that simple. If I go into it deep enough, if I'm really with it, and can get to my feelings about it, then usually it's clear to the audience.
Frankly, West Side Story is the kind of theater that I've been working for my whole life. It is the combination of all the highest arts: music, words, singing, dancing, painting, color, lights, theatrical effects, all toward something serious, not toward just having fun in the theater. I know that one of the things I work for so hard is to find the best way to communicate the clearest thing to the audience, so that the audience will receive the same impact, or the strongest impact, whether it's a comedy point, a nuance, that it is clear to them. If it's not clear to them, why all this bother? It's no good doing it for yourself.
I enjoy making ballets. I like to see bodies in movement in time and in space, and to see the relationships between them, to see what happens between people together. And there's a joy to me to be able to build something, to be able to create something, starting from the empty volume of a room or a stage, and putting movement into it, and seeing what happens as you develop that movement.
Okay, next to last, our good friend Julie Taymor. Julie Taymor started her career working in puppetry in Japan, and so a lot of her adaptations or her versions of plays will feature puppets. There's a version of Tempest that is out there that is very much inspired by Ariel being a little hand puppet, that sort of thing. Her big claim to fame, obviously, is directing The Lion King, which most people didn't consider to be able to be staged in live theater, but she was able to pull it off, and I think very effectively so. Again, storytelling through any means possible is her big thing. So here's a little bit of information about our good friend Julie Taymor.
We are there, if it's an original musical or an original play, before it's even written, we may be there conceiving. As I can talk from my point of view, a director has to help the author, the writers, the composers, the lyricists, to conceive of how the whole thing is going to be put on stage. You're telling the story through language, through music, through dance, and through imagery. And all of those are equal parts in a musical. Not one is more important than the other. Generally, a director is choosing the scenic designer, choosing the costume designer, choosing the lighting designer, and all the team. The director is sort of the artistic producer. Guiding the artistic choices is what a director does. He or she really has to be there every step of the way, being able to, almost a master editor, be able to say, okay, this stays in, this goes out, this works. No, we have too many songs in the first half, now we need to balance. It's a team effort. The director is not, it's not that the director is a dictator and a monolithic kind of character. It's all about collaboration and balancing. But the director is the guide and the leader and has to really take it in a direction that everybody hopefully is joyously following. And then it comes out like The Lion King.
All right, last but not least, I'm going to say, again, I just picked this one because this is one of my all-time favorite shows. Joe Mantello directed Wicked. Joe Mantello has won awards as Best Director for Normal Heart and other things, but he's an actor, is where his career started, and he also acts still today. He was born in 1962, so he's actually a year younger than I am, so he's very young, obviously. But the fun fact about Wicked is Wicked didn't even, he was not nominated, nor did Wicked win the Tony Award for Best Musical that year. Avenue Q won that year. But it is one of my all-time favorite shows, And this last video, one of the major reasons I've included this is because, as opposed to the other videos, which were more historical in nature, this one really shows the process behind Wicked and how a director's involvement in the development of a musical takes place. So we'll end the day with this.
Welcome to Behind the Emerald Curtain. I'm Lindsay Northern.
And I'm Sean McCourt. How does a director approach a new musical? Well, in the case of Wicked, collaboration was key in translating the director's vision onto the stage.
Winnie and I have been writing the show and working on it with Mark Platt for, I guess, a couple of years. And we had done at least 3 readings kind of on our own. And we had sort of reached the point where we felt we couldn't go further without bringing a director into the project. For various reasons, Joe seemed like a really good idea.
I just thought with Joe that he was the right person tonally more than anything. He had never done anything of this size before. What I thought the trickiest thing wasn't the size, but was the difficult tone. Sometimes it could be very moving and serious, and sometimes it was very pop and light and funny. And it turns on a dime in this show. And to navigate that is very, very hard, and I really thought he could.
One of the jobs of a director is to ask questions. One of the jobs of the director is to stand in for the audience until they get there. So I always think of it like after each day of rehearsal, I try to erase what I learned that day so I show up the next day with fresh eyes. What am I seeing? What am I responding to? As an audience member, if I know nothing about this, is it clear? Is it resonating? Does it make sense?
That first year, from, I guess, summer of 2001 to summer of 2002, it really was just script. And then, starting in summer 2002, he had to split his brain and think about still continuing making the script everything it needed to be with the authors, and also think about, well, how will I stage these things?
When you start this process of rehearsing a play or a musical, the best version of it is that you're all on a fact-finding mission together. I, as the director, will be working with the actors on the scenes, the book scenes. The musical director would be teaching someone else music. And then you gradually assemble all of those elements together, and the writers are in the room and they're making little changes, sometimes big changes. You can rearrange scenes, and there would be contributions and questions from the other designers and the other people on the team, and saying, how does this happen? What if I did this? It starts to gel that way.
Joe had a very clear sense of the world and was able to move decisively, beautifully decisively, throughout all of our conversations.
It's like whittling a stick of wood, and suddenly a form starts to take shape. The way that I feel about rehearsals is the best idea wins. It doesn't have to be my way. It really doesn't. And I hopefully try to create an atmosphere in the room where people feel safe and comfortable enough to know that their contribution is really welcome.
Joe is open to talking about things with the cast, with the creative team. He doesn't say, I have a vision in my head, and what is in my head is what's going to go on stage. He lets people, the actors, make it their own. He is truly collaborative.
You have to allow people who work very differently to achieve the same goal in their own time. And so you have to inspire knowing ultimately where you're headed.
Kiss me goodbye, I'm defying gravity, and you can't pull me down.
I'm extremely proud of being a part of the creation of a character, the character of Elphaba, who has real significance in a lot of people's lives and represents a kind of empathy that I don't think exists in the world right now. It's touched a chord with people all around the world. Something that we didn't anticipate happening was, on the first preview, when Idina Menzel made her first entrance as Elphaba, and she rushes out from the clock and runs down center stage, this young girl with an incredibly hopeful, open face. The audience broke into spontaneous applause.
And they have it almost every performance since in America and around the world, because They understood in a moment that this character was nothing like what they imagined.
I think it was this wave of passion and love and affection for the Wicked Witch of the West. And I think none of us could have anticipated that.
And that was the moment that we all looked at each other and said, oh my God. And you can't know that's going to happen, even a moment like that in rehearsal. You need the audience to tell you that.
And it was a crucial bit of information because you thought, oh, they love her. I am proud to be one of her caretakers, and I love that she's out in the world, giving people strength and confidence and an ability to believe in themselves. I think that's an extraordinary thing to put out in the world, that it does have a profound effect on people's lives.